Hi guys, this is Andrew.
Hi guys, this is Andy. Welcome again to our podcast, The Deco Mix. Today we have Barry Coleman from South Africa joining us.
Barry's a really interesting kind of guy in the industry. He's been part of a design team to design the Poseidon Mark VI Rebreather. He's started his own agency, which has become one of the leaders in the industry. He's done numerous tech dives on caves and wrecks and on rebreathers. And today we're here to talk about one of his expeditions to virgin caves in Madagascar. So without further ado, let's welcome Barry to the Deco Mix podcast. So welcome everybody, this is Andrew and Andy, and welcome to our Deco Mix podcast. Where again, we've got one of our esteemed friends and colleagues from the diving industry here to talk about his experiences in diving. So if you just want to welcome Barry. Barry and I have been friends for a long time. Some may say too long.
True.
But one of the great things about Barry is that he's one of the most fascinating people. He's done some crazy stuff in his diving career. And hopefully, Barry, you're going to talk about that today. So we're going to look at that trip. Start off with that trip to Madagascar that you had in what, 2016?
Correct. Yeah, 2016, which was
diving some pretty virgin caves there, mate.
Correct. Yeah, it was pretty. It was quite unplanned actually. Just before Dima in 2016, I was preparing to go to Dima for the raid. Show, and I get a call from the Massachusetts University, Laura Godfrey. She wanted me to help Ryan to go and dive in the caves to find and recover lemur bones, the jaw of a lemur, and could I come? So I gave it some thought of about 3 seconds and said definitely. So
it takes some thinking.
So I had to tell everybody I wasn't. Yeah, it took some thinking. I mean, 3 seconds was a long time, but then I had to tell all the people that I wasn't going to the Dima show, and they all wanted to know why. When I told them, I think many of them wanted to actually join me, but there was only just the two of us to go there. So it was really exciting. I got all my kit together, got my rebreather together, got my scooter together, thinking in my head for some reason that these caves were pretty big. And a week before we planned to leave, I get a call from Ryan, and he says, "Oh, by the way, you need to make sure you bring your side mount kit and everything." I said, "Side mount?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I got my rebreather." He said, no, there's not enough space for a rebreather. You have to dive side mount." So I was jumping up and down because my side mount harness I haven't used for many years, and I couldn't even find the damn thing. So I had to phone up Aqualung and ask them to send me a side mount harness as quick as possible. And I got it basically the same day that I was leaving. So I opened up the box when I got it from Aqualung. I threw it into my bag. Didn't even have a chance to put it all together or anything. Then I thought to myself, well, how complicated can it be? It's a side mount harness and there's not too much on there. And let's get going. It was rather funny because when I got to the airport, I was overweighted. So I had to take the side mount harness out and wear it through the airport. And I got a chance during that time to start configuring my harness in the airport. And I got some really strange looks. But the flight was from Durban, Johannesburg to Anakau, and then a flight to Tolaria, and that's on the southwest corner of Madagascar, and then a boat from Tolaria to a place called Anakau. And these, you can see some pictures there of me with the harness and everything. Fortunately, the water temperature was really, really warm. It was 29 degrees Celsius, and the deeper you went, the warmer it got. So there was no need for dry suits or anything like that. It was really lovely and warm throughout the entire dive. but it's quite funny because when you get to Anakau, you get to the beach, and there's just these small, low slung little houses on the beach, and nothing much more. And you've got a long trip by car from Anakau to the caves. It's about an hour's drive over some really thick sandy roads, and then from there you get to the parking. You've got 1.5 kilometers walk to the caves. And it was November. It's getting hot. It was quite a lot of work. And here we're prepping the cars. There's the fuel station. There's no real fuel stations around, so each of the vehicles. Let me just give you an idea of some of the preparation that went into this. Unbeknown to me, they've been planning for a year to do this particular trip, and these 2 vehicles were sent from the center, the main city of from Antananarivo to Anakau. It took them nearly a month to get there. Now, it sounds crazy, but it's true, because the roads are they're just dirt sandy roads, and there's some really big river systems. So you kind of drive down to the coast, then you've got to go all the way inland to go around and cross over the river and come down, and it takes ages and ages. And then you get flat tires, and trying to repair them is hard work. You can only take so many tires. So it took a long time for these guys to actually get to Anakau, and meanwhile we had actually flown down. And with them, they brought the compressors, the cylinders, all the kit that we need, spare water, some food, and all sorts of things. So it's quite an expedition. This type of stuff doesn't happen overnight. Fortunately, I didn't have to do too much of the prep.
One thing where we can look at is like, just quickly, I don't think people understand. People see the glamorous side of these dives and go, wow, this is, you're diving Virgin Cave, right? This is stuff where literally nobody else has really been. Like a handful of people have been and exploring this. And then they think, oh, okay, yeah, it just happens. But they don't understand the logistics involved in this type of expedition where, people have been planning this for a year to make this happen. And then it's not about strapping on 2, 3, 4 cylinders and getting in the water and going for a dive. You've got to get those cylinders there. You've got to get the gas pumped. You've got to get all of the equipment, all of the logistics behind it, right? And that sort of thing it takes a team effort, right? This is not just the individual.
Yeah, I mean, there was a big team. There was just 2 divers, but there was a team of scientists. I think we had altogether, there was 12 people altogether, something like that, if I remember rightly, 12 people all in that team. And there was just 2 divers as such. So we had scientists, we had backup guys, we had a doctor on standby, we had medical supplies that had been brought in case anything had happened. There was scientists doing their work on the surface. There was scientists who were connected with us, who wanted details from us. So they were doing work on the side. So the whole lot. And I was actually called in because the person that was supposed to be diving with Ryan couldn't make it. So they had a last minute basic shuffle, and I was the closest person to them who could literally drop everything and go. But I fitted into the team doing all the work. So, I was, for me, it was having dived and done quite a few explorations where a lot of preparation is required. I kind of knew what was involved. I knew what had to be done. So I kind of slotted in fairly easily, I think, into that team. And not only that, you've got to get all the permissions from government, which in itself is a mission. They had a person in Antananarivo, I believe, for nearly 3 or 4 months, just working on the permits to dive in these 2 caves, because these 2 caves are actually in a national park. and one of the cave is a sacred site to the local people. And to get, before we could dive, the local shaman had to bless the cave and everything, and before we could actually go diving. So it was a lot of preparation to do these 2 dives. Well, I say 2 dives, 2 caves, I should say. And, you know, we did them over seven full days of diving. And we had planned to do, we did about 3 to 4 dives in a day. And we were pushing the limits with, you know, with regards to decompression and stuff like that. Obviously we had to go into decompression because to do those dives and that many dives, we had to be very, very careful. So a lot of decompression on air because we couldn't get oxygen to the place. We couldn't get all the Deco gases there. It was just, you know, but we weren't talking long decompressions. We're talking 20 minutes, 30 minutes of Deco, but that's about as maximum as we went to. So, you know, all that has got to be considered when you do these type of plans, these dives. Yeah.
Yeah.
So from there, we
just having a look at some the images here that you've sent through. We got, this is just to give an idea of like the size, right, of what we're talking about here.
So you can see the Antananarivo's on the top right there with a black line, and then we flew down to Tolaria. It's a little town on the edge of a major river system. In fact, it's quite interesting. This particular area down in Tolaria is one of the biggest pirate areas in the world. It's even bigger than the Caribbean, because when all the pirates were kind of chased out of the Caribbean, many ended up in the Madagascar area. And Tolaria was one of the biggest pirate towns around. And just south of Tolaria, there's a huge river where the pirate ships used to actually go up there and hide from anywhere. And they used to do all their attacks from there in the Mozambique Channel. So a lot of history there, a lot of pirate ships, wrecks and stuff in that area. I would love to dive just the seas in that area for all the pirate ships. Very, really interesting.
There's a few wrecks there,
to get from Tolaria to Anacau, to get from Tolaria to Anacau, if you didn't take a boat, would take you nearly 5 days because you have to drive inland, right almost into the center of Madagascar, across the river to drive all the way back again on these
what's the distance? What's the distance actually you have to travel? I mean, the air went from
by boat. By boat.
No. If you drive, I mean, how many kilometers do you drive?
I don't really know. They just told me. We didn't drive because we took a high-speed boat, and that high-speed boat took us nearly 2.5 hours, somewhere around there, to get from Tolaria to Anacau.
I've heard though that the roads in Madagascar are some of the worst roads in the world. Like, they're not roads; it's basically just ruts in the road, in
exactly,
mud and dirt, and that's why I don't think it's distance. Distance is not something that is an issue, but I think it's
correct.
It's the condition of the roads, right? I mean, we've been to some pretty dodgy places where the road is not great and it takes you time, but these roads I think are like the worst road surfaces.
Well, let me give you an idea. It was really fascinating because the local buses are six-wheeler, six-drive vehicles. And they travel at a speed, hey? They really do on these dirt roads. They come past you, these six-wheelers. I don't know where they get these six-wheelers from, but they go past at a speed. And
well, I just looked it up. So Madagascar is about 1,600 kilometers long and 400 kilometers wide.
Yeah.
So you're probably in the middle to one edge, right? So maybe a maximum of 800 kilometers, probably 700 kilometers driving if you don't drive directly. And you're saying this would take you 5 days, probably.
Easily, yeah.
That tells you a lot about the conditions of the roads. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, it's really fun. But the logistics to go diving is really difficult. So that was one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is only one particular expedition had been there in these caves before us, and they had done, you know, exploration of the caves. And this particular project was to actually go find these lemur bones. They wanted the lower jaw of the lemur bone because they can take DNA samples from that. And so they were given permission to take 6 lower jaw bones. And we had with us, when we from the parks, we had wardens with us to make sure we didn't take more than 6, and we only took these jaw bones. And this is the skull of the Pygmy lemur, obviously the top part. The lower jawbone, unfortunately, we couldn't find this particular one. There was an imprint. You can see just below there was an imprint of one. But these Pygmy lemurs are extinct, and they wanted to find out about what time in period, you know, how many thousand years ago were these Pygmy lemurs in these caves, and when were they dry? So that was the whole expedition. So what we had to do is we had to go down into these caves and locate these bones, take photographs of them, come back. The scientists would then choose which one of the photographs they wanted. Then we had to go back and map out the site so that we ensured they knew exactly where the skull was, where the bone was, where the rest of the vertebrae was, etc., and how it related in the cave itself, and then how that related and how close any stalagmites were. Those are the ones that stick up. So they all had to be coordinated. So we had to dive down, and we found there was one particular passageway in the back of the main cave, in Avon, the cave, one of the caves named Avon, where you go in, and then there is a corkscrew, very tight corkscrew. It's in a V section like this, and it corkscrews down from 20 meters down to 40 meters. And you've got to go in it with one cylinder forward and one arm tucked in, and then I had to try and carry a camera. So it was quite a tight squeeze, and you'd go down this corkscrew, and halfway down we found these rooms. When I say rooms, they were only about, let's say 10 square meters, and the height was about a meter and a half height. So, and inside those rooms, we found majority of bones. However, there were no, this is in the main cave heading. If you see where Ryan is heading, you can see right in the back there, we found a very small crevice there where we had to actually break through into there. So he's just going there to have a look at the moment. You can see there was a line we put in, the main line, and then later on we were just doing some explorations to see where before we actually put a jump line on and started going into these smaller sections. We had loads of lights. I had video lights up, and I think we had about altogether between the two of us about 10 different lights, independent lights, video lights, backup lights, flashes from camera lights and flashlights and stuff like that. So we looked for these particular bones and only allowed to take 6. We found 10, of which only 4 of them were near a stalagmite. Now, I'll tell you the reasoning why they wanted to know where the stalagmite was. And that's because they wanted to age the cave. So what they were trying to do is say, okay, if these bones were around and the stalactite was around, then we can age the cave based on the depth of the cave, all the rings in the stalagmite, and we can get an estimate plus minus 1,000 years of when these caves were dry and when these animals were there and when they may have died. So it was quite important. So we brought up 10, and we had to map all these out, go back, check it with them. Then we had to get permission from the parks rangers that we were allowed to take those particular ones. We were allowed to bring up 10, so the scientists could choose which of the 10 they would like to have 6 of those. they chose their 6. We then had to mark on the maps which one they were choosing. And then the other ones, we had to go and put them back exactly how we found them. And then the rangers wanted us to take another photograph to make sure they were back. So it was quite pedantic in their requirements. Even though the rangers had no idea really what they were looking at, to be quite honest, they wanted another photograph. Anyway, we gave them another photograph and assured them it was back. But while we're there, we found some other really strange bones. I found the skull of what I believe, and what we kind of 80% concluded was the skull of a pygmy hippo. And how a pygmy hippo got there, nobody can guess. In fact, the last 20% of doubt was that it's impossible for the pygmy hippo to be there in the first place. But anyway, it looked like a pygmy hippo skull. It had all the markings. We checked it up. Some scientists agreed it was a pygmy. So that created a lot of discussion all by itself. We found crocodile bones down there, really old crocodile bones. And this is what, to me, was really fascinating, is all the different things we were finding down there. We found a fish that has no eyes at all. And like some cave fish, they concluded that these particular fish we found, even small fry, had no eyes to begin with. They were born with no eyes. And they were living off the bat shit that were coming down from the cave. So that was an entire little ecosystem working there. And we found a pocket, an air pocket, where the roof was full of bat. Yeah.
This one?
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, that one. You can see there's no eyes there, and it's pure white. Really fascinating little fish there.
And what's the name of it?
And that was,
did they identify it?
They did, but don't ask me the name of it because I can't remember.
Okay. You're not really good with this stuff, but okay.
you're a cave diver, not a bot, right?
Yeah, I'll get back to you with the name of that particular fish, but it was quite a fascinating fish. But we also found an air pocket in there, in which we went up into, and then there were thousands and thousands of bats in there, and then none of us could work out how the bats were getting in there, because we put our torches over the entire roof and we couldn't see any place where the bats were getting into. Obviously, they must be getting into somewhere. And the scientists spent ages walking around the area on the surface trying to see where bats were coming in and out and stuff like that. So during the dive, we actually created a lot more questions than we had when we first went in there. So that was the fascinating part of it. And this is what draws me to cave diving. I find it far more interesting where there's life in there, there's things happening in a cave, and not just swimming through a tunnel full of water as such. You could be anywhere, but if you're in a situation where you're finding new stuff, you're finding bones, you're finding new species of fish or stuff like that, that to me is the draw card for this type of diving. Yeah.
Now, Barry,
any questions so far? You guys,
you kind of mentioned earlier about how it was one of those things where you joined this team late. These guys have been together for like a year planning this thing, and you just kind of slotted in, and you fit the bill. Now, Andy and I, we work a lot on team diving, right? And it's, for us, it's really important that when you're doing any dive, really, not just a dive of in a cave or in a wreck or a deep technical dive, any dive really, you're working with people that you kind of trust, right? And that when things are going bad, when things are going to go wrong, which they can do, and let's be realistic about this thing, it can be a risky sport. The rewards are great, but the risks are also quite great, or can be. So we try to minimize or mitigate those risks, and we do so by diving with people we trust. And it's really important when we, the sort of diving that Andy and I do. Andy and I do a lot of diving. You and I, Barry, have done a lot of diving over the last 16, 17 years that we've known each other, and you kind of get that feeling like, actually, I know this guy would react how I would react in a given circumstance. And you kind of have that that mutual understanding. And I think that's really important. That's a disconnect.
It was quite funny because, you know, here I'm arriving late on the scene. The first time I meet Ryan, and he doesn't know me, I believe, for a bar of soap. At that stage, I don't know him. We're kind of both looking at each other sideways because we've got to go into this cave system. So we both kind of do, you know, like a tri-dive as such. You know, you jump in the water and swim around. We're both watching each other. But I'm actually diving with a side mount harness, which I haven't even really set up properly, and it's all over the place. I can see Ryan's eyebrows are really lifting up. He's going, "Oh, we got a real plonker here." And you know, I had to go back and sort my blooming the harness up so it was all, you know, doing what it should be doing and everything. And the second dive, I'm looking a lot better. You know, the harness is starting to work, and then I'm starting to get all my stuff. But that took me nearly a day of diving, 4 dives, to actually just get that blooming harness into a configuration that was doing what it was supposed to be doing. And Ryan started starting to relax a little bit. So we didn't just jump in the water and disappear into these caves. You know, we took some time just kind of swimming. Avon is quite a big cave, and it's got some really it's a sinkhole as such. It's the roof has fallen down, and you've got some really interesting sites around the base of the sinkhole before you go into the tunnels and stuff like that. But we took some time just kind of getting used to each other and making sure that we were happy with each other and the way we dived. And because that was really important, because later on, you know, if you think about it, you're going into these caves. Yes, there's all these beautiful items on the floor and everything, but the floor is full of silt, and you just have to touch that bottom and it silts up completely. So, you know, you're working in a new cave. You're working in a situation where the silt up is especially when we're in the small sections trying to get these bones where we found the most. It was inevitable. By the end of the dive, it was silted up, and now the two of us had to get out of this, and to get out through a very small crack where you're having to push one cylinder forward. You've got your head like this, you're squeezing through a crack, and you've got to go up this corkscrew tunnel, you know, and hopefully making sure that nobody gets stuck in between, and in complete blackout by the end of it, because you know, you're in such a small space. There's two of you trying to map out things, and no matter how hard you try and how hard just a hand movement starts the silt up. So you're trying to draw something, and then you want to maybe churn, so you just maybe you fin at the back, but that fin, because you're in a small space, creates a ripple on the roof, which then goes down on the floor and then creates a spiral of little dust coming up. So by the end of each mapping section, we had to leave that section for like 2 days before we could go back there for that silt to settle before we could actually do anything. So we switched between Avon and another cave called Matao, between the two, and they were about 200, 300 meters apart from each other. One was completely black walls. Everything about the cave was black. The walls were black, the silt was black, the stalactites were black, everything completely black. And the Avon, which was almost all white. Everything was white, and you know, so you had these two extreme caves which we were switching between, and really, really interesting. But going back to the trust, the last part of the expedition, the scientists wanted a stalagmite that was close to where the bones were, and they wanted it from where the ground rock was. And we found that was about 1.5 meters of silt. So we had to go down through all the silt and then get this stalactite out. I think I sent you some pictures of that stalactite, which was cut up into it was cut lengthways so they could see the aging of it. Really important, because you know, you go into caves and you always taught not to touch this, not to touch that, don't break this. And here we are being told to go and retrieve one of these, you know, by the scientists. So quite a different experience in that regard. Trying to get a stalactite off the bottom with a hammer and chisel in complete blackness takes some doing, I can assure you. First of all, neither Ryan nor I realized they wanted one of these. Now, the one they chose was nearly 2 meters, just over 2 meters. It was 2.2 or something like that. Here, they had to break it up to ship it, unfortunately. So these are the parts, and you can see the lines. The part on near the 0 is the bottom, and the part on that little scale up in the 100 is the higher part. So that's a 10 centimeters. You can see there just 10 centimeters of rock.
Yeah.
Think about it's 2.5 meters now. It is heavy, hey? It really is heavy. And we hadn't brought lift bags to lift these things. So we had to go and get 25-liter drums and turn them upside down and then fill them with air. And so we filled them with air, and we agreed between the two of us not to put too many lines in, because the more lines you have, the more, you know, entanglement you get. So we had one line from Ryan to the main line, then from me, a line from me to Ryan, and that was it. But we had to work together, so we had we didn't want the line so catching up. So had 2 hooks, one to shorten it, so I could unhook one and lengthen the line, or pull it up and shorten it so it wasn't dragging all over the place. And we used a fairly thick 10mm line, so it was easier to work with than thin line, because thin line can, in water, if you're moving around, it can actually get into blooming granny's knot. Anyway, so I'm at the bottom. First of all, I decided to go down and start to chip away at the base of this, and I'm chipping, and I couldn't. If you ever try to use a hammer and chisel underwater with nothing to hold on to, it doesn't work very well. So eventually I found something, a rock behind me I could wrap my legs around in the silt, and I started to chip away, and after a while I got pretty tired. Now it's complete blackout. You cannot see a thing. And I signaled to Ryan, I pulled on the line, it's his turn, and I gave him the hammer and chisel, which was our signal. And again, we did a lot of planning on this. We had mapped the particular area of the cave out considerably. We had looked for if there were any other cracks or crevices which would lead into any other holes. It was a one entrance in, one entrance out. So we were pretty well prepared to work in the black, and we'd actually even practiced blacking our masks out, making sure we could get in and out. So we'd done a lot of preparation before we did this. And that's really, really important. So I'm down there now, and like inevitable, things go wrong. So he started going down, and I was trying to get up, and the line hooked. So I unhooked it, and as I unhooked it, he was trying to pull, and he pulled it out of my hand, and the line was gone. And I thought, oh, well, now I've lost the line to him, but I have got my hand on this big stalactite, which was fine. But as I held it, it rocked, and the whole thing broke off, and me and the stalactite went straight up onto the roof. Now the roof didn't have any other stalagmites or tights hanging down. Didn't have any of those hanging down, so it wasn't like we were going to damage the roof or anything. And also the amount of air and the weight of this thing, we had estimated. You can't really calculate because you don't know the weight of this blooming thing. So we had estimated we needed 4, and it actually just lifted it up, so it was just touching the roof. So it wasn't like stuck to the roof. It was just almost neutral, but slightly positive.
So you touched it before you chopped it off, right? You touched these barrels and put the lines around it.
Yes. Yeah. You have to, because you can't do it afterwards, because if it falls down,
it would fall down, and then
yeah. So we tied them all up. So we had one at the bottom, 2 in the middle, and one at the end. So Ryan's gone down. Now he's just about to chisel away, and the thing breaks off, and because it's black, he didn't even see it. So now he's looking for it, and it's gone. He says he couldn't find this thing. Now he thought that he was in the wrong space. So he now starts looking around for it, and he's saying, what the hell? And then he found a small one, and he realizes it, and he goes, touches the top, and no, this is not it. So he starts looking again. Meanwhile, I've actually gone up onto the roof of this particular cave, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I've got to get, what do I do now? Do I drop a line down? Do I not drop a line down? It's completely black. Do I tie a line off to the stalactite and go down to the bottom looking for the other line? Can I look for to the main line near the surface? Can I reach it? No. So it was really difficult. And I decided just to I wrapped my legs around the stalactite and stalagmite, and I started to pull myself along the roof. And eventually I came out of all the silt. I managed to get the stalactite, push it through to all the scientists. I went back down along the main line, put a search line on, and went searching for Ryan. And he was still looking for the lost stalactite, and then for me, because he realized then that he had lost me. So he was getting a little anxious, and then I grabbed his fin and said, "Hey, here I am," type of thing. So took, when he pulled it, when I got him out, when we swam out, I should say, he said, "How the hell did you get that thing out?" Because it was now out. And he said, "I knew I'd find you some stage, but it's just a matter of when." So it was quite an interesting expedition there. So I'd actually, when I went back, I took new gas with me, because we had actually put some spare cylinders just up the tunnel in case of a situation. So when I went back, I thought maybe he would need some. So I took that back as well. So lots of preparation. And I think it's only because of the preparation that we did that actually the situation wasn't bad. If you hadn't done that preparation, then I think the situation would have been much worse now.
If you went back and you had the opportunity to go back, and you've said like before that when you initially got the sort of call to action, you prepped your scooter, you prepped your rebreather. Now I know for a fact you dive mainly back-mounted rebreathers, right? You dive the instructor is your main choice. We do differ on our preference, shall we say, of over-the-shoulder counterlungs as opposed to rear-mounted counterlungs. I know that there are different
what
reasons.
Makes the world go around.
Well, it is one of these things, and this is the beauty of what we're doing. So if you and what I'm going to get to is, if you went back, if you had the opportunity to go back, and you said, okay, I know what to kind of expect, because a lot of our exploration into these sort of caves, virgin caves, wrecks, or whatever, we don't know what to expect, right? So sometimes we tend to have the wrong equipment, right? And we're all about, basically, you have the right equipment for the right job, and it's a tool.
Correct. Yeah.
It's a tool to help you achieve. Yeah. So if you had the chance to go back, knowing the conditions, knowing the logistics, would you go back with a side mount rebreather, for example? You've said it's like restrictions and that. Is there a need for a side mount rebreather in this instance?
Well, put it this way: you've got to go 20 meters in the one cave, 20 meters in a corkscrew position, and you're almost upside down, going down 20 meters. Now, from my experience diving side mount rebreathers, they don't really like to be upside down in that position going through tight caves.
Yeah, it depends on which rebreather you got. It depends on the hydrostatics of your breathing. But vertical up down is generally not a great position with these things.
Yeah. So and a majority of these, and it's in a corkscrew. So when you come out, you're actually upside down. Funny enough, when you come out the bottom at 40 meters. And that's just one position. You could, take the side mount rebreather and take cylinders and go on open circuit down the corkscrew. Then when you get to the bottom, you could switch over to the side mount. That would work, certainly. Getting it through, you could push it through and stuff like that. The other question is the logistics. Are you going to have all the zorb for it? Are you going to have the oxygen? Are you going to be able to get the oxygen there? So all you're doing is you're adding to a huge logistical issue. Would it be compensated with taking extra cylinders down? Well, there's give or take. What is going to work? At least with the rebreather, you're getting the optimal gas mix. Most of the time. So yeah, a side mount rebreather would probably work. Would probably do the job down there without a doubt. It might reduce the logistics without having to carry, loads more cylinders. but you still have, you've got your bailout. So you still have got to carry those cylinders down. So, you know, it's 6 of one and half a dozen of another. And again, what you're going to be most comfortable with? What's the team going to be most comfortable with? You know, Ryan, I know, doesn't dive a rebreather. You know, and if I was going to dive with Ryan and he's not on a rebreather, then I'd rather stick to open circuit. So there's a lot of questions you have to kind of put together and come up with what's going to work. You know, I don't say no to it, and I don't say yes to it. It's just, you know, depending on the logistics and how easy it is to do it, and what benefits is it going to give you. And I think that's an important aspect, you know, many people forget today. You know, they dive a rebreather, so every diver's got to be with that rebreather, no matter what, you know. And I tend to think on the opposite. What equipment do I need to have fun on this dive? You know, what equipment's going to work for me in that particular dive? Is it deep wreck? Do I need a scooter down there? Do I not? Does back-mounted rebreather work? Yeah, it does. Okay, that's great. But am I on shallow reef where there's lots of coral, and do I need a scooter and a rebreather? Well, how long do I want to stay there for? So, you know, the question is, what do you want to do down there, and then what equipment's best for the job, which I think you mentioned here.
Yeah, that's really key. I think the industry today has very much focused on a lot of the industry. Let's say, let's not make it overly sort of big, but a lot of the industry has focused too much on the fad at the time, right? What is the popular thing amongst people, and typically hit like the marketing side of it, where people have got their interest and gone like, oh, I want to dive this, I want to dive side mount, or I want to dive rebreather. And I think for me, the real important thing is not what you're diving, but kind of like you're diving the right equipment for the right job. And all this equipment is a tool, right? I mean, we each have our preferences. We dive a lot of you know, say twin tank diving, back mounted, rebreathers, back mounted. But that's not to say that side mount rebreathers or single tank does not have its purpose, right? If you're doing a scientific reef project, or you know, in 20 meters of water, what's the point in having a rebreather? You don't necessarily need it, right? Whereas a set of twins would give you longevity under the water, give you enough gas. But even then, a single tank, fine, does the job, isn't it? So I think it's really that picking the right equipment, not being so narrow-minded as such to say, I am only going to dive this, and be it back mount, be it side mount, whatever. I think that's really important for people to understand.
Well, don't forget, equipment was developed to do a job, not because it was a fad. It was side mount that came out of the need to go into these tight spaces and sumps. So people kind of came up with this concept of putting the cylinder on the side. So, you know, nowadays it seems to be like, okay, what's the fad? Let's go and dive that, rather than what equipment you need for the job. What do you think, Andy? Andy, you're very quiet there.
Oh, I agree. I totally agree. I'm just listening to you guys. I mean, I totally agree. Yeah. I think the industry itself has made the different equipments or tools like a purpose for promoting things and selling things, rather than promoting it for the job that it needs to be done. Right. I mean, a few years ago, suddenly side mount came out of nowhere, and then suddenly everybody wanted to do side mount diving. Although side mount was around for a long time, but it was just promoted. And then suddenly everybody jumped on a side mount course, and then you got to divide side mount, back mount, and then you know, recreational rebreathers, right? You were there as well, right? And then suddenly, rebreathers are recreational rebreathers, so everybody promoted it, and suddenly, that's what I want to dive. So it just didn't go back to what you discussed about what's the right tool for the right job. It was just hyped by promotion and by different people in industries, and that's what I think is right.
By the dollar, yeah.
It's about money. I know. I understand. Yes, correct.
But it also leads on to another important aspect with when we talk about equipment. Now, we're divers, right? And part of being a scuba diver is looking cool, having the gear, right? And we all kind of want to do that. We want to look good, and you know, that's part of the thing that we aim to, we strive to do in our diving. We want to look good doing it. But one thing that I kind of like have struggled with over the years is when I teach a course or I go diving with somebody, I really get frustrated with people, and we're all instructors here. Barry, you've created your own agency. You've founded your own agency, which is now doing relatively well in the industry, right? And that's something to be extremely proud of. But the things that I've got frustrated with, and I'm sure you guys have as well, is that people come onto courses or people come onto dives and they've got all the gear, and it's that phrase, isn't it? All the gear and no idea, right? And I really strive to sort of change that thinking in people when they do a course. It's like, okay, I'm saying to you to set up your equipment in this way for this type of diving, all right? But what's really important for me is that I don't just say, well, do it this way because I've told you to do so, because I'm your instructor and therefore I'm your dive god, because I mean, I'm not. But what I can say is,
well, we know.
Here, yeah, thanks for that. But at least sort of a demigod. Let's just go demigod for me.
Oh, you brought yourself down.
I brought myself down a little level, right? But what we can say is that if I'm saying to you here, set your equipment up this way, right? I'm not saying this is the only way to skin a cat and set it up, but what I am trying to do, or what we all try to do, and I know I've seen you teach, Barry, I've seen you teach, Andy, we all try to do the same thing. It's like, explain to the diver why you're doing it in such a way, so that when they come back onto a boat or a dive site at a cave or whatever, or they go on and do a further educational course, that they can actually say with some conviction, this is why I'm doing it this way. You know, that whole thing of like, why do you do it like this way? Because you get people, when you get up in the industry, in your qualifications, you get looked upon by other newer divers, and they'll say, well, why'd you do it this way? And you go, oh, well, actually, don't know. My instructor told me. And that's a really frustrating thing to hear from people, because it's like, no, you don't understand. Your safety and, in fact, your enjoyment of your dive will be vastly improved if you just put a bit of thought in and you had an idea about why you're doing things a certain way. That's really important, in my opinion.
I think I have a little bit of a reputation for bucking the industry as such, because in 2003 and 2005 we did a dive on the Oceanus, which is pretty deep. It's in an area of the world which is, again, you have to take everything to dive, but the currents are howling. So it's 100 meters to the bottom, but the current there is an average 1.5 to 2 knots minimum, and can get up to 5-6 knots in places. So I put an expedition together, and we had one guy on twin open circuit set. I was on an inspiration back mount, and my friend was on a what was that unit? It's gone out of my head. He was on a Rebreather back mount as well. But all three of us were all on different configurations. Now, there's some people out there which would actually balk at that idea, but all three of us were very comfortable in those configurations. And so again, it goes back to, what are you comfortable diving with? What are you able to do in that configuration? And, you know, can you work with others in a different configuration? So yes, it's good to have everybody in the same configuration because you all understand each other, but it's also good to that if you're in one configuration and somebody else is diving in another configuration, to be able to be adaptable enough to actually recognize what they're wearing, know how their units are working, what their possible problems would be, and how to resolve those issues. So I don't think it's something which needs to be, it's probably one step up from everybody in the same configuration. You need to be at a level where you're actually able to think about what other people are going through and what they need. So that was a bit of a, you know, when the industry heard that I'd done something like that, they were all like, "Oh, you shouldn't be doing something like that. You should all be in the same configuration." But we did it successfully, and we did it successfully 5 times without one incident at all, not even a close incident. So, you know, the whole thing is, for me, is, are you comfortable diving in the configuration? Do others know how that configuration works, and what is the priority, and how it's what possible dangers there could be for that configuration or not? And I think that's another thing that the industry's kind of fallen away from. What are your thoughts?
But it's kind of like that thing where there's arguments for and against that sort of thing,
yeah.
and where you stand in that, and I believe in that flexibility. You know, it's that saying, like, if you have whatever equipment you use, or I'm going to dive side mount on this one, I'm going to dive twin tanks back mounted. It's that having the flexibility to achieve the job, the objective of the dive, if you like, if you're doing a project-based dive in that instance,
yeah.
and do it in a safe manner. Now, there's arguments for and against. I would ideally prefer to have a standardized system where the team dives as a team in that instance. And the main reason being is a bit of uniformity to it, that when really, you know, things are going bad, they tend to really spiral badly. And getting back to something that everybody knows would kind of quicken that getting into the calm state or calmer state in order to resolve that problem. But I also see the argument where you're providing, where, you know, well, we are comfortable, we know each other's equipment, and for example, you're an instructor on numerous rebreathers, so perhaps you're an instructor on that rebreather, and the other guy is also a highly experienced diver on your rebreather, for example, and then you're both open circuit. So there is a kind of uniformity there. You also get the idea of uniform being or standardized system being the fact that we can swap gear readily, so that, for example, you know, Andy and I are the main divers for that project, and you're one of the support divers. My inflator hose goes down, I can then borrow one of yours, for example, because your equipment is not needed on that dive, and we can achieve that objective. And for some of the dives that we're doing, where you are quite exposed, you are quite in the wilderness, shall we say, that's also quite an important key. You know,
I think the main thing is, can you all breathe?
I think the main thing is it's can you breathe? Are we doing this in a safe, prudent manner, basically? Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, from my side, I'm leaning towards what Andrew said. I mean, I'd prefer standardized configuration for every diver. But I can see your argument as well, Barry. And the only reason why I would not want this, if I jump with somebody in the water and they don't have the same configuration like I have, if I don't understand what they're diving with and they don't understand what I'm diving with, that's when it becomes really dangerous, right? I mean, you have a rebreather, I'm an open circuit diver, I have no idea, never a rebreather. That's when things really start to go sideways, in my opinion. That's what I don't like. I mean, different story when you did it, right?
It's experience, really, because the divers I were with was, you know, really, really experienced. Hyneth, sorry, I can't, not Joel. I've forgotten his name.
Well, you wouldn't go to 100 meters on a wreck with massive current with novices. No. Put it that way, right?
Yeah,
correct.
I must be getting old. I've forgotten his name. Hyneth, Mr. Hyneth.
I don't know, mate. I've forgotten your name. What, you know? That's how.
I must be. It's too much nitrogen, I think.
Yeah. But I mean, at the end of it, I think what we come down to is that there is more than one way to skin a cat. There are arguments for and against it. But the real key thing, and we can talk about this on another one. We're going to have you back on a podcast. But you know, you've made your own agency, so I think there's a lot of responsibility falls on the training agencies to put this sort of thing within their standards. And there are several agencies that have done so, and there are several agencies that are a little bit more fluid, shall we say. Not to say that they're unsafe or anything, but it is just a little bit a different viewpoint. And I think those, you know, it depends on the personality who's making those standards, and how strong they are in making them. And that's where it comes through in the training agencies. But in ourselves, as long as we're doing the dives, like I said, in a safe manner, and that people know why they're doing certain things, then I think we're kind of okay. There's the argument of like, oh, I've done that dive 1,000 times or 100 times, whatever it is, right? I've done it so many times, and I've made it. I'm safe. I'm back on the surface. But it's kind of like, well, did you get away with it for those 100 dives? And it just takes one, right? It's like, we had no, you know, there were no instances. I've had no instances for 1,000 dives in this one area, and I'm all good. I've been doing it this way. Well, yeah, it might work, and I'm not saying it doesn't work, but there's always that sort of idea, that sort of thing in, well, were you just getting away with it? That's the real crux. And when that problem occurs, are you in a position to resolve that problem and get everybody out of the water at the end of the day? We don't really know. We don't really know.
Thinking divers is an important part of it. You know, are you a thinking diver? Have you done your risk management? Have you checked it all out? Experience counts tremendously. You know, as you said earlier, I'm not going to go into 100 meters in a strong current with guys who are not experienced and don't have the capabilities and wherewithal to do a dive like that. So yeah, it's really, really important. And also, you know, are you capable in yourself to be able to try and get yourself out of as many problems as possible and not rely on others as such? You know, I believe in, you need to be self-capable to be able to look after others first. You know, if you're going diving, you're thinking, well, someone can look after me down there. You shouldn't be down there. You should say, am I capable enough to look after myself and others? Yeah. And that's a big issue.
Yeah. I mean, I go into, you know, Andy and I go into caves, you know, we go into wrecks or whatever. And when you're in those situations, yes, you're like, am I going into somewhere like that with somebody who I know, if the things went wrong, they could help me out here. But am I going in, actually, if it really went wrong, can I get myself out in a safe manner? And this is for another one of our conversations that we're going to have, because obviously this is a bigger conversation and things like that. But you know, there are lots of people out there when particularly when they dive rebreathers, right? This is a very contentious conversation to have with certain people, because they'll be like, no, I'm like an alpinist, right? Or no, I'm carrying everything with me. And then there's the people who kind of sit in the middle, and there's sort of arguments for either way, and it can create a lot of tension amongst divers. But that's for a conversation later on. So I just think you know, there's a lot of arguments back and forth, and you know, we will want to talk about your agency that you created, and there's a lot of thinking behind that. But that's maybe set for another time, because we are actually running out of time for this episode.
Okay. All right.
But Barry, we really, really, you know, I'm in awe of you. I've been diving with you for the last 17 years. Andy's known you for the last almost 10 years now.
I think so, yeah.
And you know, you've done some fantastic things in the world, in the industry. And like I said, just one of them is making your own agency from scratch, and it's now becoming a bit of a forerunner in diver training. And there were some instances or things that you brought in, which kind of a bit of a game changer, and we certainly want to hear about that. We certainly want to hear about your sort of experiences or your thoughts on rebreather diving, and we can come back to that. So you know, if for example, any of you listeners have any questions for Barry on rebreathers, or what it is to make your own agency, or just diving in general, then feel free to drop us a message, put it in the comment section here, and we can get back to Barry on that when we have him next. But on that note, Barry, it's been great having you on, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Barry.
Well, thanks, guys, and you guys are doing a great job keeping things going while this COVID is hitting us, but it doesn't stop us from going underwater at some stage.
And it doesn't stop us from sort of spreading our love of diving either. This is what we're all about. We're trying just to get that bit of excitement, bit of drive into diving, while we're all facing a bit of a tough time around the world currently. But we hope to continue. And for all of you out there, please listen in again. And until then, see you later.
Thanks,
Cheers,
Barry.
everyone.
Take care.
Cheers, eh?
Bye-bye.